When I started this YouTube channel a little over a year ago, it was as a creative outlet, and I've definitely gotten that out of it. But something I wasn't expecting was just how social a YouTube channel can be. A few months ago, I published a video about the top 5 things I learned growing up in Generation X, and I'll put a link to that up in the corner if you want to check it out. That video got a lot of views, which is awesome, but it got a lot of comments, which was amazing. So many of you were like, yeah, Generation X, and don't forget about this cool thing, and we learned this too. Memories that you had and remembered back how cool it was growing up in that era. As a thank you then for all the great comments, suggestions, ideas, discussions we had over on that video, you inspired me to do this follow-up, 5 more things I learned growing up, Generation X. That's right now.
Don't you know that you're a grown up? No games, no puns. Not allowed if you're a grown up.
Hey, welcome back to GenXGrownUp. I'm John. I am a GenXGrownUp. Thanks for checking out the video and the channel. As I said in the previous video, this video and the channel itself is not about dissing on baby boomers or millennials or anything like that. It's about celebrating what was special about growing up in Generation X, the 70s, 80s, early 90s, and what it meant to us and why we loved it so much. So without further ado, let's get right into this sequel inspired by your comments, 5 more things I learned growing up in Generation X. And number 5, adaptability. What do I mean by adaptability? Well, if you're watching this video right now and you are a Gen X'er, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. You adapted to the digital age. We grew up in a very, very analog age. Lots of physical switches and click buttons and dials and meters, and very little was digital. But something about how we were brought up made it easier for us to adapt to the digital era. Maybe it was all of the science fiction we loved, that we aspired to have, all the Star Trek-y stuff that finally came to life, and we were eager to jump in and figure out how to use it. Whatever the reason, you'll find that the majority of Generation X'ers have no trouble figuring out touchscreens and the internet and computing, all the stuff that was never around when they were born, but now they've jumped right in with both feet. Yeah, I know, there's still a few analog holdouts out there, but by and large, we embrace that technology. By contrast, I know baby boomers today that have had just as much time to adapt to the digital age as we have, who are still struggling with what's email versus AOL. How do you swipe on a screen versus tap on a screen? They don't get it for whatever reason. We figured it out. Let's move on then to the number 4 thing I learned growing up Generation X, muscling through. By muscling through, I mean more than just stick-to-itiveness. I mean natural endurance that gets us through some hard times. During the time we were growing up, we lived through an entire Cold War scare. Russia was this horrible bad guy, and at any moment, thermonuclear war could rain down on our heads. People were preparing their homes, lives, and families for the very real likelihood that a nuclear war could break out at any moment. They were building bomb shelters. There were shows on TV and documentaries all about what could and might happen should this ever occur. And we lived with that day in and day out. And you know what we did about it? We muscled through. Each day we got up out of bed, peeked out the window to check for any mushroom clouds, and since it never happened, we put on our big boy pants and we went to work, we went to school, we got on with the act of living. When that scare finally wound down, the world breathed a collective sigh of relief together. But we didn't forget. We were prepared for the eventuality of something major happening again. In the current political climate, there's so much uncertainty and so much chaos and confusion. But Gen X'ers know how to push through with that. We get up every day, put on our big boy pants, and we head out to work and head out to school because we've been through it. We know together we can survive, we can make it through, and we do. Let's move on to the number 3 thing I learned growing up in Generation X, cultural literacy. Cultural literacy is about being aware and informed about all of what's happening in pop culture and media, regardless of whether it's your stuff or another generation's stuff. Here's what I mean. Anyone born in the last 20 years has their own screen. They watch their own shows on their own TV or on their computer or their tablet or their laptop or wherever, and they're not forced to sit and endure what their parents or grandparents are watching. Generation X'ers seldom had that luxury, especially not at first. Having a TV was still a novelty to our parents, so having more than one seemed like a crazy extravagance. So when you watch TV or listen to the radio, of course, if you're by yourself, you can watch what you want. But if you're there with the family, you take part in what the family is doing because there are no other options. Of course, we watched and loved the things we wanted to in media and pop culture. I celebrate that every time I do a video here on GenXGrownUp. The point is, I know who Lucille Ball is. I know Bob Hope. I know Leave It to Beaver. Because sometimes my parents had that on TV, and I either watched it and learned, or I didn't watch TV. That's just how it was. So let's move on to the number 2 thing I learned growing up, Generation X. Unjustified optimism. What do I mean by unjustified optimism? Well, as a generation, we're more likely to have divorced parents and come from a broken home. We're often called insignificant compared to the boomers before us and the millennials after us. And across the board, we are the first generation to make less money than our parents did, and we're liable to have very little saved up for retirement that we're closing in on fast. But despite all that, we look back on our childhood fondly. Now, maybe that's madness, maybe that's some form of insanity or delusion, but it's true. We have an unjustified sense of optimism. We think we can do anything. We think we'll be fine. It's almost as if no matter how hard the deck is stacked against us, we seem to find the silver lining on that cloud. It doesn't make any sense, but it's true of Generation X'ers. I've seen it in myself and in my friends. I don't know, maybe it is a form of delusional madness, but I know this for sure. There are some times that sense of unjustified optimism can really help you get through the day. Let's move on then to the number one thing I learned growing up is Generation X, live and let live. Now, though I'm talking about this as something I learned growing up as a Generation X'er, I'll be the first to say that compared to us, millennials have this on lock. I'm talking about tolerance of other peoples, other cultures, other races. We probably all have parents and grandparents that did or maybe still do struggle with that sort of acceptance of different ways of life or different ways that people choose to live their lives. Our era was the start of tolerance, of embracing and celebrating the differences in people. And we're certainly not perfect at it. I know I'm not, nobody really is. We all had grandparents and great-grandparents that literally grew up in an era when it was fine to say, if that's not normal, it's bad. But collectively, we were the first generation to not just dig in our heels and say, this is what's normal and nothing else is right. We started to try to embrace those changes, those differences. We're still working. And millennials, I think the reason that they are so good at acceptance and being able to embrace other people's differences is at least in part because they inherited and saw us working at it to change ourselves. So yeah, live and let live. It's something that we learned growing up in Generation X. Hey, I really hope you found something to enjoy in this video inspired by your comments and input on our previous installment. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Don't you know that you're a grown-up?
Subscribe to GenXGrownUp by clicking right here and enable notifications so you won't miss a thing. Use the comments down below to tell us what you think, and while you're there, a thumbs up would be great too. Please share this online wherever you hang out. Connect with GXG on social networks by clicking right here.
Basically, life sucks.